Hello, William Miller.
Hello.
Good to see you, and thank you
It-
for consenting to be interviewed as part of the Conscious Leadership Guild's program and effort to help each other get to know each other better. So
mhm,
let's address the 5+1 questions, and I'll take them
Good.
one by one. And please feel free to respond as you see fit. Okay.
Sure. And feel free to give me time instructions so I don't ramble on somewhere.
All right. Well, the idea is to spend about approximately 2 minutes per question responding to the question. So I'll let you kind of time it. And if my face goes like this,
Yes.
you might find a way to get to the end of the sentence. Okay.
Right. Sure.
So the first question is, what's a story about how spiritual wisdom has touched and supported you in life and work?
Well, the story that comes to my mind is when I was back in graduate school in Georgia. And I was in a program on humanistic psychology and organizational development. And there was a faculty member there named Tit Galvin who was from Thailand originally, a woman who had studied with Maslow, became a psychologist in the USA. And she said when she first came to the USA, she was actually quite puzzled. She told this story once because people were achieving all sorts of wonderful things and all seeming so in motion. But she said, but there was no peace. She couldn't understand why people didn't feel peaceful and fulfilled by all that they were doing. And she said she finally realized that in her understanding, the people she met basically felt I don't have any value. I'm not worth anything really unless I can prove myself. I've got to earn my value here.
Hmm.
And so they go out and achieve something, and then it would be like last Sunday's football game. Okay, that was great, but now you got to do it all over again. So the default was I'm not really worth much as a human being unless I can maintain this kind of steady reaching social bars and whatever. She said, where I was raised, we were taught that we are inherently valuable just by being a part of the universe. It's not something you can gain more of, and you can't lose it either. But she said there is an art of life to live with that truth. And that has touched me because back then it really helped me understand, yeah, that's where I'm living from
Mhm.
is, you know, I'm not really worth much. I've got to prove myself and I got to measure up here and measure up there. And from my childhood, even I had that.
Mhm.
And where that translated was also in my marriage with my wife, Deborah. We realized that there's another theme here, which was that we marriages are typically taught in, well, the two shall become one.
Mhm.
Very popular phrase around the world.
Right.
But she said, we've been married before, each of us, and that didn't create a long lasting relationship necessarily. And what we were learning from India was the notion, and actually from other religions eventually, was that the notion of oneness expressing as two, that we are part of a oneness expressed as a male and a female. So it's not two becoming one, it's oneness that pre-exists has expressed itself as many. And that sense also of wisdom has enabled us to have a stronger marriage,
Mhm.
to really joke about, oh, oneness is really expressing differently as we do right now, And those pieces of wisdom have really inspired me about striving spiritually and striving in my life to recognize that we come from oneness, not separateness.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's a struggle, as you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So those would be the two pieces I would say were two different stories, but
Thank you for sharing.
they both live with me.
Thanks for sharing that. It's
Mhm.
very practical and obviously comes in daily life, as it were.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely,
Very
absolutely.
good. Well, thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
Here's the second question. What wisdom and experience can you offer to the dialogue about conscious leadership?
Hmm. I had to think about this question ahead of time too. Where I'd like to start is, you know, I have my career since 1982 has been in the field of corporate innovation and what it means to be innovative, to think innovatively, to act innovatively, produce positive benefits through innovation, and so on. And I early on in the 80s was the head of innovation management at Stanford Research. But during that same period of time is when I had a spiritual awakening time.
Mhm.
And I began to see that spiritual values, or what you might want to even call human values, those values of good character that you find across cultures and across time, things like caring for each other, keeping your promises, trying to do good, serving each other, and so on, that those were foundational to innovation as I was beginning to experience it in the corporate world. They weren't
Mhm.
nice to haves, they were absolutely the root of effective innovation when you're especially in teams. And it's been nice where Hewlett Packard and Google have now, in the last, um, even the last 10 years with Google, last 5 years with Google, have talked about, well, one of the foundational pieces of an effective team at Google, maybe 50% of what makes it effective, is they practice psychological safety.
Mhm.
Translated that we know how to trust each other, how to care for each other, and how to be honest and transparent with each other all at the same time.
Mhm. Mhm.
We're not honest but brutal. We're not caring but trite.
Yeah.
You know, we're all that. And so, how to bring that kind of spiritual or human values alive, which is really around being conscious to me,
Mhm. Mhm.
and apply it to the whole world of corporate innovation is one of the backgrounds I bring to this. And I give it just a very quick story. I was once time working with one of the major computer companies with their salespeople in New York, and I was teaching them about the innovation process and innovative thinking. And I said, okay, now let's try this out. So I said, what's the goal that you want to work on here? And they said, oh, hey, that's easy. How to make more money.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, we'll start with that, but I just want to ask you a question. How would you express that goal or explain that goal in terms of a benefit to your customers? Like, what? What?
Mhm. Mhm.
And we worked with that until they could come up with a goal statement that was basically how can we serve the customers in a way that also helps us to grow?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's the shift that a conscious focus of being a conscious innovator, so to speak,
Mhm.
can bring to those kind of conversations. And so now in my current company, which we call values centered innovation, that we bring that into everything from culture to climate to innovative process and thinking to team building. How do you bring that dual theme of strong good character values and being innovative together?
Mhm.
And finally, the last thing I'll say is that when I was in my 30s, when I was at SRI, that I realized that my particular purpose in business, in my work life, was how to examine and explore how spirituality, creativity, and business were all facets of the same jewel. They weren't even separate things that had to be brought together.
Mhm.
They were just different viewpoints on a single entity of how we work at our best. So that's really what I've been following here.
Excellent. Excellent. I can relate to that, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later. So thank you.
Sure. Good, good.
The third question is, what's your leading edge?
Mhm.
Or what energizes you to discover and learn?
Well, given this probably makes sense with what I've shared so far, but to take this notion that we are all expressions of divinity.
Hmm.
We're all expressions of source, oneness, Yahweh, Buddha, whatever we want to call as a source name,
Hmm.
Jesus, Father, Brahma.
Hmm.
We're all expressions of, those names are just focusing on, they're pointing the way to something we've called source here in the guild. But how are we all expressions and embodiments of that?
Hmm.
One of my favorite people is Toyota Chardin, who was a paleontologist and a Jesuit priest who wrote wonderfully in the first half of the last century
Hmm.
about how we are all that the we are all divine flames of love as expressions.
Yeah.
My question is, how do I deepen my own experience of that? Those words sound nice, but how do I have that as when I'm sitting down eating dinner, when I'm sitting on my patio looking out over the park, when I'm in front of a group giving a talk? Do I have that experience that we are really somehow a one being in multiple forms,
Hmm. Hmm.
coming together? Yes, we are individuals, but we are more than what our senses can perceive about how we are related.
Hmm.
Our senses limit us to seeing things as separate by sight, by smell, by taste, by feel, by hearing.
Hmm.
The whole world seems separate from us. Well, how do I pierce that illusion in my experience? And then how do I bring that to share with other people? Because this whole notion, even my wife and I have been working on a new book called The Conscious Innovator, the 3 Minute Conscious Innovator. And one of the changes of mindset is this: start from oneness, not separateness.
Hmm. Hmm.
Well, if that's your starting point, oneness expressing is two, like in our marriage,
Hmm.
not two shall become one. Two shall become one starts from separateness. Well, how do we do that with our competitors in business? How do we do that with our customers and other stakeholders? How do we do that with our team members? How do we do that with a difficult boss?
Hmm. Hmm.
That gets really practical. And it's where this journey truly is a purification journey from a spiritual angle.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that's the journey that I'm on.
Hmm.
That's my learning journey.
Interesting. Well, it clearly takes antagonism and puts it into a very different perspective when you start from a point of oneness, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I love this one thing. I grew up as a Christian, and I've always loved what I felt was the most radical thing Jesus ever said was love your enemy.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
if you take an enemy literally as someone who's out to do you harm antagonistically, and you're supposed to hold that person in love, that's the shift of consciousness of seeing that there's a oneness here that predates and pre-exists the two.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so how do you hold that space? And from everything I've learned in life, it is in that space that you have access to wisdom.
Hmm. Hmm.
And when you're still in that, I'm going to beat this person, I don't have wisdom to access. I've got good street smarts, but that's not wisdom.
Yeah.
And I'm interested
Yeah.
in the wisdom.
Yeah. Sounds wonderful. And again, a lifelong work, isn't it?
It is absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
good journey. It's a good journey for my wife and I to be on together too.
Wonderful. The other question, the fourth question is, what do you long for? That's a deep sigh.
It is. This was the question that took me a while when I was thinking ahead of time.
Hmm.
And um, at the retreat that we had, the virtual retreat in September, Darius's son sang a song,
Hmm.
wishing us all kindness and peace. May I be well. He started with may may I have be kindness and peace. May I be well. And then went on to may you have kindness and peace. May you be well. May we have kindness and peace. May we be well. May all have kindness and peace. May all be well.
Yeah.
That is the kind of what I long for this world as well as for myself, to have that sense of living in that kind of conscious connection.
Hmm.
And a version of that is to have the experience of I'm not missing something as a whole person. I am a whole person. I'm not, most motivations is about I lack something, how do I get it?
Hmm.
I don't want something, how do I avoid it? It's a need based motivation. My quest is around, I think I used this maybe at the guild session. I imagine two rose bushes. One is 2 feet tall, one is 6 feet tall. Is one more rose? Does one have more rose bushiness than the other?
Hmm. Hmm.
No, its essence is the same. One just
Hmm.
has to be 2 feet tall, one is 6 feet tall, but they're both 100% rose bush. can I see myself as 100% whole, even if I compare myself with you or somebody else as also being 100% whole?
Mhm.
And can I have that experience? Can you have that? Can we have that? Can all have that? Because coming back to that Tip Galvin story, the idea that I don't have value comes from I'm not whole.
Mhm.
Well, how do we get that discovery that as an expression of divinity, we can't be anything but whole? We've just gotten talked out of it.
Right.
you know,
Right.
how do we recover that as a planet? So
Mhm.
that's my vision. That's my longing.
Well, I definitely resonate with that and look forward to sharing my perspective on that with you as well. And I appreciate you
Good.
sharing yours. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
The fifth question is, what kind of support am I inviting from guild members? So,
hmm One thing that I'm excited about, and I look forward because it supports me in this journey,
mhm,
is if I follow and have learned from the teachings of so many different um, founders of religions, that changeless or unconditional and selfless and fearless love is the very essence of Source.
mhm,
It's the
mhm,
very essence of the nature of who we are.
mhm,
And I love the fact that the Guild has picked that theme up in a number of different places in the subgroups that have been happening.
mhm,
The Love Hour meditation that is starting. Um, in this, the society group also talks about, has some people writing papers on love. John Renish just did one on Love Your Enemy, you know.
mhm, mhm,
Um, to bring that sense of love is an essential core of conversation here. I love that support for my journey because I'm hearing it, I'm getting deeper in it, I'm trusting the movement of it. It doesn't feel crazy to talk about that in business like it used to.
mhm, mhm,
It feels actually, it's like values. It feels like it's now fundamental and foundational,
mhm, mhm,
you know. And so we're finally getting down to the roots of what it means to be in business, to or be have an organization that's serving an NGO, whatever, nonprofit. And we're getting into the roots and the fundamentals of what actually makes for a healthy society and a healthy economy.
mhm,
You
mhm,
know, I've noticed how the fashion that we've had up until the roundtable even started reversing themselves last year, that the whole purpose of business was shareholder wealth.
yeah,
And the whole notion behind that was, gee, if somehow, if we're all greedy enough, it'll all work out to a healthy economy,
yeah, yeah.
which is craziness.
There are no limits
Because
with that kind of
how could,
mindset.
for an unhealthy mindset, how do you expect to produce health?
Yeah.
You know, that's like eating junk food and expecting yourself to be healthy. Well, this is something different. This is a focus on how are we healthy from love as we run our economy, run a stakeholder based economy, rooted in the proper values. And from there, we will get a healthy global economy.
Mhm,
That's how I
mhm,
see it.
mhm, mhm. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
And then we get to a question that says, what is the one thing you could share that would help us to know you better?
Mhm.
What's the one thing you could share that would help us to know you better?
Besides the fact that my nose itches, um,
I can pause it for a moment if you like.
no, that's okay. Um, the fact that my wife and I lived in a multi faith ashram in India for 16 years.
Hmm.
And that from the time that I was 51 until the time when I was 67. So it was a later in life transition. And that was where I became enriched in spiritual traditions. It was a multi faith community. Um, notion there is that, well, if you're Christian, be a better one. If you're Muslim, be a better one. If you're Buddhist, be a better one. If you're Hindu, be a better one, and so on. Um, knowing that we all have that foundational source that we can come from. And it was such an enriching experience that it's fed everything that I've talked about here and just continues to feed me in terms of feeling grounded in spirituality and understanding that all these words are just nothing but signposts. They are not the destinations. They keep pointing to the way to what we can find in silence or that which is beyond words ultimately. And so that's an important part of my life that we would even pick up and move to India full time
Hmm.
and just live there full time for 16 years. Came
What
back and
prompted
do that.
that? What prompted
Uh,
that?
a yearning,
Hmm.
a yearning to, I had been visiting there myself since 1982. Um, and see, before that, even for 20 years, from the time I was a freshman in high school all the way through college in my 20s and early 30s, I had taken an annual retreat. I went to a Jesuit high school. We'd go off for a Friday, Saturday, Sunday once a year and say, how's your life? Did that in college, did humanistic and growth potential workshops in my 20s and early 30s. And I got a prompting to go to India. It was something I never had aspired to do, never looked for a guru, but ended up at this ashram and found that it fed my heart. And I said, well, this will just be where I come back to once a year since I've already been doing this for 20 years.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it just fed me over and over and over again. And it got to the point where I wanted to spend more than just say 2 weeks or even 3 weeks a year. I'd like to spend 3 months a year.
Hmm.
And that started the whole sense of moving. And when Deborah and I got married in 1999, um, it was a natural to say, well, let's try it. And for her, she'd never been to India before to this place, and it was like a duck landing on water for her. So,
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm.
and we just said, okay, this is where we're called to be. And, home is where the heart is, and our heart was there. So that got us there.
Synchronicity. That's very,
Hmm. Yeah.
very good. It turned out that way.
Yeah.
Well, William Miller, thank you so much for responding to these questions and sharing
Hmm.
with the broader Conscious Leadership Guild members who you are and your inner thoughts and feelings. So, thank you.
Thank you, too. It's just been a delight to be with you.
Thank
Thanks.
you.